am I being too comfortable? And that's when I decided, okay, I'm going to look elsewhere. I was aiming at going to Japan, landed in Korea, which I knew even less about. I'd never heard a thing about Korea. And I was like, okay, sounds like a new experience.
Welcome to International Love Story, the podcast about intercultural relationships. My name is Christina, and in today's podcast episode, I would like to welcome Clarice. Clarice, just go ahead and introduce yourself. Like, who are you? Where are you living at the moment? Tell us all about you. And most importantly, what are you doing at the moment?
Great. Thank you for having me. So I'm Clarisse. I'm based in Barcelona, in Spain. I'm a French native speaker, French citizen, and I'm a language teacher. I teach French to partners of French speaker. That's my main. And yeah, I'm just interested in languages, in social relationships, and traveling as well.
And obviously the language part is one of the reasons why I invited you today. I had the honor to record podcast episodes with so many couples and individuals already. And the thing I've learned, and obviously also in our relationship, is that as soon as you start learning the language of your partner, and as soon as you speak the language of your partner, it brings your relationship to another level. And that's something I would like to dive a little bit deeper into later on in the recording. But before we get there, I would like to know, like, how did you end up in Barcelona? Because when we had the little pre-talk, which I think is also very interesting, I've learned that you have lived in several countries already. So you also went through a few culture shocks in the past years. So I would really love to learn about, like, what brought you to Barcelona, and maybe also a little bit about your relationship, because I think that's also very interesting.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. So I would say I've moved around a bit in the last 10 years, more or less. And that's mainly because of my job. So I got interested in being a teacher and teaching my language, because also it would give me access to other culture and get in touch with different people. So my first experience, I got to live in the US. So I guess I must have spent like close to 2 years in the US, but like in two different instances. And then I moved to South Korea. I lived there for a bit, came back to France to finish my studies and get my diploma. And then I found my first job in Tokyo, Japan, where I lived, met my partner there. And after a few years over there, he moved to Spain, and a little bit later, I decided to follow him here. So thanks to my job, like I'm able to like move around maybe a little bit more easily than other people.
Your job as a teacher, as a language teacher.
Yeah.
And how was it for you in general to move from one place to the other until you found your love in Tokyo, right?
Yeah.
And then he moved to Spain, and you were like, okay, eventually I'm going to move as well because I'm very flexible. It sounds like he was moved to Spain because of his job, right? And then you had the option to either stay in Japan, having a long distance relationship, or move to Spain as well.
Yeah, exactly. Like moving from countries to countries, like I think I got kind of lucky, or like I took some opportunities. I did a few internships. And so with internships, I had some kind of structure around. I think it made moving a little bit easier because like there were people waiting for me somewhere. They were helping me setting things up, maybe helping also with where I would live. So I did like a stay with a family in the US, for example, which take a big things out of my hand. Like I don't have to worry so much. So my first like big international move, I guess, was moving to Tokyo, because it was the first time like I had the job that I had to like figure out where I would live and things like that on my own. So then I did the same thing moving to Spain, which I think also had the different thing that I was not moving on my own. I was moving to Spain to join my partner, and that was our first time moving in together. So there was a lot of things at the same time. When I look back, I kind of think like I took things seriously, but I didn't like worry too much. I was kind of hopeful things would like happen and I would figure things out, which is kind of interesting because I'm kind of an anxious person. But with moving abroad, usually like the excitement part of like going somewhere new and learning new things kind of like balance that stress, I think.
But you definitely have some experience when moving abroad, which is like in the beginning, it's so exciting. It's the honeymoon phase. And after like 3 to 6 months, you get to a point where you start questioning everything and you're like, what the heck am I actually doing here? Until it slowly goes up again, because especially in the beginning, yeah, you want to make friends, socialize and all of that. And you have been through that a couple of times.
It's been working for me, I guess.
Making those experiences, it's easier to throw yourself into new situations because you kind of know what to expect already. And what you've just mentioned as well is that you were like, okay, it's all going to fall into place somehow because it did in the past. And why shouldn't it be the case nowadays? Like in that case either. You get more chilled and relaxed about stuff like that, definitely.
A little bit. With time and with experience, I guess I have probably some strategies at this point. It's just that for Japan and for Spain, like the language barrier was the main part that was like worrying me. Because like I moved to Japan not speaking Japanese and I moved to Spain not speaking any Spanish. So I know every time there is that added level of struggle that's coming.
How many languages are you speaking?
So I would say I speak 2 languages. I have a hard time saying I speak more because I speak French, that's my native language, and then I speak English, and that's my daily language at this point. I've been studying Japanese for close to 3 years now. So I would say that's the language I'm probably like the more advanced, but like that feels a little bit too much to say I speak Japanese because I'm still quite limited in how much of a conversation I can have. I've started learning Spanish more recently. Being in Spain, it felt like the next language I should add to my list. And I guess in the past, I learned German in school and I learned a little bit of Korean when I was living there. So I have a little bit of things here and there, but like I forgot a lot of German and I forgot almost all the Korean I had learned.
Your partner and you're communicating in English.
We communicate in English, yeah.
And earlier you mentioned that you are taking your job with you, which is also easier for you to move from one place to the other. And because of all of that, the past couple of years, you decided to be self-employed. That's correct,
yes.
Right? In order to be more flexible. And this is when you dove deeper into the field of teaching French. So what was that experience?
So I always taught only French as a foreign language. But yes, in the past, I worked with schools that would like have the students come and then I would just have to teach. But because of the condition of teaching, especially in Spain, like the pay rate and the hours and the type of student I would have in front of me, I was like, okay, this is the right moment for me to like jump into being self-employed. And especially because also I have decided that like it's likely that with my partner, like we will change countries probably another couple of times or something like that. And that if I start it now, then I have this option of just like taking my job. And like, since I teach online, I can keep my students and continue working with them as long as our hours kind of match. But yeah, like becoming self-employed has been like really exciting because I have more freedom in deciding with who I work. And I also feel closer to the students that I teach because there is not like the school in between us. Like I'm the school, so I can be maybe a little bit more friendly and like they can also feel a little bit more comfortable with me because there is not any intermediate in between us. I guess it comes with a little bit of stress at time as well because my pay depends completely on me and on like how well I can do. But so far I'm still excited about being self-employed and learning how to deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been there. I mean, not teaching German or teaching another language, but being self-employed, it's definitely also a roller coaster ride on its own. But what I love is that you're learning so much about yourself as well, about your boundaries about what you're capable of. It's crazy. And then also, obviously, knowing that you can take this job wherever you are makes it so much easy, because if you think about the future and you're like, okay, we don't know where we'll end up eventually at some point in our lives, but you know that at least you have some sort of income.
It's reassuring, I guess, also to like change your life completely, change country, potentially change language, but like job remains the same. So that can be like my safe space for like the little while that it takes to get accustomed to a new place, I guess.
What's the reason why your students decide to learn French? I mean, I guess there's a wide range for the reasons why.
I have like different profile in my students. Some of them just have an interest in the culture and are quite interested in the linguistic part of it and want to be able to access content and consume things in French without having to go through a translation or something like that. But what comes often is that people have French friends, or maybe they've met some French people and they'd like to interact with them in French. And then I have like my main audience, I guess I could say, which is people who learn the language because their partner is a native speaker. So usually the students, and like they're kind of like in the same situation as I am, which is they already have a common language with their partner with which they build their relationship, but they want to take like an extra step of like connecting a little bit better with their partner. But what comes up the most is that they want to communicate with the family of their partner, because they may have a common language with their partner, but oftentimes their family-in-law like doesn't speak that language.
How do you think this is affecting a relationship in general? Let's say in our case, not just in my case. I'm learning Spanish at the moment. I feel like I'm slowly progressing. And I also feel like what I think is very cool is that I can finally understand his mom, for example, because she's not speaking English. But I'm able to catch up with 85% of what she's saying, even though if I'm not able to communicate, because I'm still like a little bit shy, to be honest. I still want to make sure that everything, like what I'm saying, is perfect. And my head is just confused with different languages, and I'm like translating from German to English and then from English to Spanish, which does make it easier. Like,
yeah.
But I'm just wondering, like, how it's affecting a relationship once you get to a point where you finally understand what the other person is saying in French in that case, and when you're finally able to communicate also in that language.
So with the partner, I'm still kind of wondering, and like I haven't heard many experience of people being able to completely switch the language, even though, so let's imagine at some point like get really fluent in Japanese and then I can speak to my partner in that language. I'm really wondering if like, are we going to make that switch? Or even though I can speak and like we could have a conversation, like is that something we're going to do because our relationship was built with the English language? So I guess like there may be a moment where like that feels a little bit off, which may be like interesting. But with family, like there is no, before you're able to talk with them in this situation, there is like a lack, there is a gap in the communication. Because even if someone is translating, if you're using technology help to communicate, there is still, I feel like, a layer that's missed in this case. And that's probably the part where like people are able to show their personality. Because through language, there is a layer of, there are the words, but there is also like the way it is said and the tone and the intonation and all of that. And I feel like if you don't speak the language, even though you may be able to translate it, there is always something that remains missing. As small as it could be, you don't access 100% of what that person is trying to communicate. And I feel like that's what you get once you are able to communicate. I would say there is also the cultural aspect. You also have to learn, because it's the same thing. You could have all the words, understand the personality of the person, and yet there would still be that little bit of like, oh, this is not like a personal, this is not a linguistic thing. This is a cultural thing. And I feel like those extra bits, this extra layer, you have to learn it, and oftentimes you have to learn it Like it's kind of intertwined with the language and like how people think. At the moment, like I've had some of my students tell me like they were excited. Oh, I had a conversation with my mother-in-law and my boyfriend wasn't around and it went okay and we had fun. Or like in my case, even though I'm far from being able to have a conversation, like I'm able to make like little joke and try and show my personality a little bit maybe with the language. I'm like, yes, like this is me speaking, like this is me communicating. I'm not just building a sentence to transmit an idea. I'm transmitting so much more, which I think is the main goal in this situation. Because when we are part of a family, like we want to be embraced and like our personality to join and like to be part of that and I don't know, connect, I guess, in this way.
How's the other side reacting, like in your case, speaking Japanese?
That was kind of fun. This summer, we went to Tokyo and spent a few weeks there. And that was the big moment for me of like, okay, I've been studying. I'll be spending time with his parents. I'm going to have to communicate. Like, this is my time. And when I first arrived, I think, I don't know, because like, as someone who is not learning a language, I have no idea like how his parents may have thought like my level was. And they started speaking to me in Japanese the first night we arrived. And I was tired from being on the plane and things like that. And I was like, oh my God, like I'm so not ready for that. My partner was kind of like, oh, do you need translation? I was like, yes, I obviously do need translation. But after a few days, like I had settled and like I was more aware and figuring things out. And also I think his family figured out where my level was at so that they could adjust a little bit and speak with more intention of maybe making things clearer. But just in general, I think his parents were really excited that I could communicate a little bit. Like they were really patient with me when a couple of times I spent time with them without my partner. So I was just on my own, having to make sense of things. As long as there was not too many distractions around, I was able to like figure out how to communicate and have little conversation. But at some point, like my brain, after a couple of hours, would just completely freeze and I wouldn't be able to make any sentence. And they were really, really nice. They were like, oh, okay, we get it. I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm tired. Like, I don't understand anything anymore. And they were just being really nice and understanding.
But I love that they give you the time in order to speak and to build a sentence and to think about it, because especially in the beginning, when you really try to get out there and to speak in your language, it takes time, obviously. But having someone sitting on the other end, I feel like I'm under pressure now. I have to prove myself right now. But if I realize the person on the other end is patiently waiting, still smiling at me, giving the time I need, I'm okay. But listen, the thing is with my mother-in-law, she's not patient at all. It's so fun because we have been to Argentina like last year, but also the year before. And the year before we went for 3 months. And there was one situation where I was sitting with my mother-in-law alone in the car while Nacho went out to get a few things. It didn't take long, maybe like just 10 or 15 minutes, but I was alone with her. And I mean, she's very like, she's speaking a lot. You know, she's also typical Argentinian, likes to talk, which I love. But then she would ask me some questions and I wanted to reply on, and I was some sort of like, I thought I was doing well, building a sentence, but she would immediately interrupt me. I was like, what's going on? What's going on? And then once Nacho came back, she would ask him like, hey, what did Tina tell me? And then I would translate that to Nacho and Nacho would ask me, hey, how did you say it in Spanish? I repeated it in Spanish and Nacho was like, but that was perfectly fine. I really have to pull myself in there and be like, okay, guys, here am I, like, deal with me. I'm speaking
That's
Spanish.
the word culture. I think in your case, like the culture plays a big aspect in probably like you not having the time, because this is not my experience, because I think in Japan, even in between two native speakers, they're kind of really patient and they take time and they really listen to the other person. So I guess for Spanish, this is probably a different way of communicating. And maybe it's more like the French language where like it's totally fine to interrupt people. But in Japan, there isn't that culture. So that really made me like, I know I have the space to really, really listen. It happened a couple of times, like I thought I made sense. And then my partner's mom was like, okay. I could clearly see like she doesn't understand. And then once like my partner, I didn't even need to tell him what I meant. He understood my Japanese and just rephrased it for his mom. And I was like, oh, okay. So like, because you know me so well, you understood what I said just by putting things together, but his mom had no idea. I think that's where like the whole like personality aspect plays a role into like understanding what the other person is saying, even though like it may not be the correct way or the grammatical way.
I love that there are different ways in general to communicate, and that every one of us is so different on how they communicate something, which makes the conversation very interesting. But also the fact that the cultural aspect is playing such a big role in languages in general. Like the way you say things, I feel very comfortable in English. I feel like I'm very direct when speaking English, right? In German, we would try to say something, but we wouldn't say it directly necessarily. So even though we from the north of Germany, we're known for being very upfront, I have troubles getting things out there and saying exactly what I'm thinking. While else in English, I don't have that at all. So I'm so curious to see how it's going to be in Spanish, because it's definitely another personality. It's still me, but it's another personality. At least this is how it feels like. And I think you have confirmed my experience as well in our pre-call, that you feel the same in different languages.
Because I feel like also with English also maybe, I think because it's not our native language, there is probably like a little filter we don't necessarily have. English is such like a freeing language in a way. You can express so many things and you can be direct, but there is still like a tactful way to say things. But I think in French, it would be kind of similar to German, where like sometimes you probably wouldn't be as direct and you may say one thing hoping the other person would understand like the subtext of that, which in English, I feel like I don't really need to do, even though it's totally like doable, but I don't really. And especially also with speaking with my partner, because it's like a third language in between us. We don't necessarily have like 100% the same understanding of the language. There may be some nuance that may be lost in the process. So early in a relationship, we figured out, okay, we should just say what we mean. So like there is no wondering about, oh, but you didn't say this, or okay, I didn't say that, but didn't you understand? Like we cut that real quick. I guess I cut that real quick because that was more my culture seeping into English. So yes, with English now I'm more direct, and I'm also more comfortable. I really like speaking English. I'm really comfortable, and that's kind of really funny that I'm building a relationship with someone using that language, because I'm much more in touch with my feelings in English, I think, than in French. Like French seems like, oh, I don't want to say, I'm a little bit shy. I could easily feel judged also probably for expressing how I'm feeling. But with English, I'm like, that's completely fine. I'm going to say how I feel. Here is how I feel. Mm-hmm. How you react is your problem, is not mine. When in French, I would probably still be a little bit like, oh, maybe I'm not going to say the word. I'm going to make them understand how I feel without saying I am blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. I feel you, which I think is interesting as well. I have a friend from New York, and I met her in Argentina. So she was on vacation for a couple of weeks. And one of the first things she said to me was like, hey, I love the way you express yourself in English. It was like, why? Like, what's wrong with the way I'm expressing myself, or what's up with that? She said, like, it's street language you're using. Like, okay, that sounds negative. And you're like, no, not at all. You're just very direct, and I like the way you're talking. We're like, okay, I did not notice that, but it's cool that someone like a native English speaker is realizing that and is giving me feedback on that. Thinking back in general, because as mentioned, you have been able to make quite a few experiences, living in different countries, learning different languages, diving into different cultures. What was the biggest learning in general the past few years?
I think I've learned many things, but maybe I've learned that like you can live your life without having to like know the language. I lived in Korea. I moved there. I had no idea about the language, no idea about the culture, and it was fine. I think you don't have to know beforehand before you jump into something. I guess it doesn't apply in some situation. But when it comes to traveling or getting interested in a culture, moving abroad, I think sometimes some people may be like, oh, I can't move to Spain. Like, I've never spoken a word of Spanish. Like, of course, life is not going to be as easy as it could be if you speak the language of the place you're going to. But it also comes with other learning experience because you don't speak the language, you're going to have to find other strategies and to figure things out in a different way. But in my eyes, I would say it's not necessarily a bad way. It's just a different way. And this is something that I actually was looking for. So I did my bachelor's degree, was an English studies diploma. And so it was obvious for me, like, okay, I want to go to the US. I was super interested in the culture. I wanted to like improve my English. It was, an English speaking country. And then when I entered my master's degree and I had to do internships, same thing. Obviously, I had a great experience in the US. I want to go back. And I had to look for another internship. And I started looking into Australia. And I was offered an internship there. But at the last minute, I was like, oh, like, this is another English-speaking place. Like, am I being too comfortable? Am I kind of like shooting myself in the foot and not gaining experience outside of the English-speaking bubble? And that's when I decided, okay, I'm going to look elsewhere. I was aiming at going to Japan, landed in Korea, which I knew even less about than Japan. Like I could put it on the map, but I'd never heard a thing about Korea. And I was like, okay, sounds like a new experience. I'm going to learn something. I wanted to get away from the English bubble. I guess this is the first step in that direction. And I had such a great experience. Everything went smoothly. I felt I had such a great experience in South Korea, even though like I barely knew the alphabet before landing in Seoul. I met some really great people and I felt really welcome in the culture, even though I was not able to communicate. So I was like, oh, okay, if I can do that, that's awesome. I can learn later. I don't have to stop myself from meeting new people and getting new experience because of the language barrier. So I felt like that's what I learned. Though I don't think I would have the same opinion on jumping into a relationship. I don't think I could do it. I know some people do. They start a relationship without speaking a common language with their partner. I think that would be like a little bit too far of a jump for me. I guess some people have done it and then they built great relationships, I guess.
That's also an interesting thing to think about. How does that work?
I have no idea.
So in case someone is listening or watching, in case you have made this experience, please give me a hands up. I'd love to talk to you because I'm really amazed by, I know for sure it's possible, but I'm just asking myself how. Like, wow. Really getting to know each other without speaking the same language. I love the way you are pushing yourself somehow, pushing yourself to learn something new, maybe also to handle a situation you might think beforehand, maybe it's not going to be too comfortable because it's nothing I know. It's a new bubble, as you just mentioned. And then you just go for it. And so far, you've always made good experiences, right? Or was there one time where you thought to yourself, okay, why did I even do that? And I would never do that again.
Well, of course, there are some down moments, I guess, even though like my experience was great in Korea. I'm pretty sure if I search my memory enough, I'm going to find a specific moment where like, oh, that was uncomfortable, or like, this is not what I signed up for. But if I like look back at all of my experiences and like the different situation that happened to me, I feel like, yeah, there is nothing that's, oh yeah, I shouldn't have. But also I feel like, because you say, oh, you're really pushing yourself, I wonder, and it just crossed my mind right now, is that sometimes, even in daily life, even in my own country, in France, there were situations where I was anxious or I was stressed about something. And I think what happened is that, like, it's not more stressful to be abroad and not speak the language. For me, I would say being in an uncomfortable situation in France is almost the same as being in a difficult situation in a foreign country. And now, like last time I've been in France, I had a couple of awkward moments and I felt like, oh no, this is much worse because this is my country. I speak the language. People would assume I live here or like I'm familiar with what's happening. So I felt really stupid for a couple of times. I was like, oh my gosh, the person in front of me must think like, what's up with her? You don't get that abroad because people are like, she doesn't speak the language. I guess that makes sense. She's not from here. So it doesn't make you avoid completely stupid situation. You can still make stupid choice. It's less harsh because like your ego doesn't get bruised as much because it's like, oh, it's a learning situation. So I think that's probably what I appreciate from being abroad and probably why I'm so comfortable pushing myself because, well, like nothing worse is going to happen. It's not worse than having a difficult situation in my home country.
That's definitely an eye-opener, like asking yourself, couldn't this situation occur in my home country as well? And wouldn't have that been even worse? Because, for example, Germany, paperwork, love that. And so, yeah, thank you so much for that. To slowly get to an end, I am wondering, because right now you are in Spain with your partner, how is your future going to look like the next few years? So your plan?
So our plan, I think, so the first thing is we're waiting on my partner to finish his PhD, which is the reason he's in Spain right now. There is not like an exact due date on that. Like it's a little bit of a flexible situation. So we're not really sure. And then depending on where he's offered a job, we will decide where we will be moving. And that because of my flexibility, I'm mostly open to any country. Of course, that will be like a discussion to be had when we're closer to the end of his studies. And yeah, like I'm ready for the next move. Like right now, living in Spain for so long, I guess, because I guess by the time we move, it will probably be around 5 years living in Spain, which would be the longest I've lived in a country. That's not mine. I think by then I'll be excited to move, get a new experience, potentially in a new country, because there's so many places I haven't been. And yeah, I'll keep working on my business and I'm hoping like this will move on to like bigger scale. And then hopefully like in a few years, we will make our family a little bit bigger and we'll have a new language adventure with a baby probably.
So talking about your business, anyone who's learning or who would like to learn French, where could they find you? Like, what's the best way to contact you?
I'm mostly present on Instagram, clarisse.professeur. So that's spelled like professeur as like in French. And I also have a website, but the website I'm still working on because it's a new edition. But yeah, through Instagram is the best way to get in touch with me. I'm really active there.
Definitely link everything in the side notes below. So for everyone who wants to get in touch with you, just click the link and you'll find Clarice. And yeah, so far, I mean, we've been in contact for a while already. Also Instagram, this is how I found you. And communicating almost on a regular basis. And I feel like, we know each other since a while already, which is so funny to think about. But I definitely know for everyone who would like to start learning French, they will be in very, very good hands. So definitely contact her. I think that's going to be a great experience. And I feel like you're also very, very patient with your students.
Oh yeah, of course.
I have to be honest.
Yeah, it's usually
so fun as well.
Yeah, I really love my job.
Yeah. Yes, I've seen that you basically, without even noticing, because you said that mainly you are teaching, I think it was A2 level, right?
Yes, so I like working with beginners. So from A1, A2, B1 sometimes, it depends. I have some higher level students that I've been teaching for a while. So of course, like once student reach a certain level, if they want to keep learning with me, they're welcome to do so. But yes, I mostly focus on beginner student because I really want to work on that confidence and like for them to have someone who's patient and who's also understanding, because as a language learner myself, I feel I can help on that side of staying motivated and being really encouraging.
And also giving a little bit of the cultural aspect as well.
Oh yeah, of course.
Like the basics basically to understand the language a little bit better.
Yeah, that's really important.
You're doing a great job on that. So again, thank you so much. It was great talking to you a little bit more in detail about what you're doing, who you are, where you've been the past few years. And yeah, crossing fingers that your Japanese at some point will be fluent as well.